This is the Truth with John Gordon. Assaulting the narrative. Destroying the lie. Unearthing the truth.
I want the truth!
This is the Truth with John Gordon.
Happy Saturday. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk to you about the October surprise, Zelensky in Pennsylvania, Eric Adams in New York, and Kamala is going to the border. We'll talk about it. We also have a wonderful interview where we're going to unmask the deep state. And then you'll want to stay tuned, I promise you, for our second hour, Growing Old Gracefully BS. I am going to take you inside of what it looks like to get a facelift. You don't look good.
I don't look good.
And I think you're going to enjoy it. All right, so here we go. I've been talking to you for a long time about an October surprise. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got 37 days left. I've got a seatbelt on. I'm firmly implanted in this chair because I'm telling you, I don't know what's coming, but I know something is coming, and I want to be buckled in for when it does. What could it be? We've got war raging in the Middle East. We have war raging on the Ukraine-Russian border. I suspect that it could relate to one or both of those skirmishes. I have said, and I will repeat, I do not put it past these people to stoop to no new lows. It would not surprise me if these wars somehow become combined into one, and we have the beginnings of World War III, and that Biden comes out and tells us the elections are suspended for national security purposes. Now, I'm not Alex Jones, and I don't make stuff up. So I'm not predicting that. I'm not telling you that that's going to happen. I am telling you that it is on my list of potential things that could happen. Or it could be just as innocuous as Kamala Harris, the border czar, going to the border for the first time in 3.5 years. That would never happen. Oh, I think it's happening yesterday. She went to the border and it was a farce. When Trump went to the border earlier this week, he stood and he answered reporters' questions for an hour in over 100-degree heat. And he stayed there patiently and answered the questions. Did Kamala do that yesterday? What did you expect? You don't still believe in the tooth fairy, do you? Don't fall for this nonsense. And by the way, she introduced an 80-page economic plan. Read it. Read it. It's Biden's reinvented. It's Bidenomics all over again with a new face on it. Don't fall for this. The listeners of the truth are not in this category, but the majority of the people, no, they're not the majority. Half of America validate everything P.T. Barnum said. You know, a sucker is born every 30 seconds. Well, in the United States, I think it's about every second now, because half of the voting people in America believe in Kamala Harris. Why would you believe in Kamala Harris? I don't know. Because you don't believe in her dogma, or maybe you do. Those people who still believe in the tooth fairy. That's what it is. Joy and happiness abound. Well, did you feel joy for the last 4 years? Did you feel happy for the last 4 years when they imported tens of millions of illegals who came to America, who they transported to the heartland of America, who they're now trying to register to vote as illegals? It's very clear what the purpose was. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. Just look. But I'm the proverbial preacher preaching to the choir. Of course you know what it is. It's a way to ensure one-party rule while they're talking about Donald Trump, the dictator and the fascist, and everything they say is one projection after another. Speaking of which, Zelensky this week came to America to attend the UN conference. Did he land in New York? No. He landed in Pennsylvania, a battleground state. Boy, is there truth to poetry in that statement? A battleground state. How prophetic is that? I just thought of it, actually. But he landed in Pennsylvania, a battleground state in the 2024 elections. And what did he do? He toured munitions factories. What is the subtle message that's being conveyed in Pennsylvania? Possibly the most important battleground state of all. Oh, the Biden administration is creating jobs while waging war in the Middle East and in the Ukraine against Russia. These people are as incompetent as they are duplicitous. If you don't believe it, just ask Eric Adams. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, where they have deposited thousands of illegal aliens, and they're staying in the Roosevelt Hotel and in abandoned hotel buildings and motels on the outskirts of New York City. And they've had to create entire camp zones for these illegals to live while their homeless veterans lie helpless on the streets of New York. No one's coming to their aid. People who fought for our country, who came back to America, who don't have a place to shelter, yet your tax dollars and mine are going to pay for illegal immigrants to live in camps and hotels that we are paying for. And Eric Adams had the audacity to point it out, to criticize Biden and Harris. Wasn't very smart on his part, because now he and his cabinet are all under indictment. Now, this is really interesting to me because the mainstream media is portraying this for what it is. They're saying, well, is it really an indictable offense to ask for a hotel upgrade? Which is basically what Eric Adams accepted. He accepted upgrades and trips and some entertainment, and now he has been indicted for corruption. I guess the people who entertained him and who gave him upgrades may have contracts with the city of New York. I don't know. But good Lord, if this is going to be the standard by which we evaluate our public officials, every public office holder in America better be running for governor, because they're going to come for you next if you criticize them. I don't know. The reality is I really do not know. Here you have a liberal Democratic mayor of New York who is being indicted by the Biden weaponized Department of Justice. So basically you've got two people who should be compadres suddenly being put at odds with one another. I wonder what the fallout is going to be. Now, just fantasize with me for a minute that Eric Adams realizes this for what it is, as he has already called them out on it. He hasn't really called them out on it. He just said, I guess you should ask them if this is lawfare. And people in the crowd said, of course it is. It's political. What if Eric Adams' surrogates start coming out and saying that maybe Donald Trump would actually be a better solution for the state of New York? You know, they've narrowed the margin from 23 points in 2020 to 11 or 12 points. And now I'm learning that the margin has been narrowed to 5 or 6. That is, Harris is ahead of Trump by 5 or 6 points. That's almost within the margin for error. It is not within the margin for cheating, which is what we really need. We need a 5 or 6 percentage point margin in the popular vote and in the swing states to prevent them from being able to cheat sufficiently to steal the election again in 2024. Those are the kind of rough numbers. If you look at the dynamics right now and you look at the Electoral College right now, Trump wins with over 300 electoral votes based on the popular vote and the way that people are currently predicting the swing state to go. Speaking of which, keep your eye on Georgia. Kemp is going to save Trump in Georgia. He's going to fundraise for him, and he's going to turn his ground game over to Trump. And if you believe that, I've got some land just out here west of West Palm Beach I'd like to interest you in. I don't believe it. I don't trust him. I don't trust Kemp. I don't trust Carr. I don't trust Raffensperger. Why? Because they've given us lots of reason not to. I judge them on their deeds, not their words. And now we understand that Harris is up 3 in Georgia. You add another 5 or 6% for cheating in Fulton County, it's looking like Georgia is going to be an uphill battle. We need New York. Is it possible we could leverage what they're doing to Eric Adams into a W in New York State, where I believe they've got 28 electoral votes? The entire belief system, value system, policies that Biden and Harris have given us are based on a bunch of lies. They're telling you that Bidenomics works. Yeah, it worked all right. It gave us 9% inflation that they've somehow managed with help from Jerome Powell to get down to, I believe, just north of 3% now, while unemployment has skyrocketed to 4.2%. What a wonderful economic policy they introduced. And it's all traceable back to irrational, irresponsible government spending, which amounted to $7 trillion. And now those chickens are coming home to roost, ladies and gentlemen, because the interest payments are coming due. They've got to get the interest payments down, or else we won't be able to afford the debt. I'm telling you, we're approaching a tipping point, and I think the only salvation is to get Donald Trump elected. But their whole policies, their whole talk track are based on a series of lies. In 2020, Kamala Harris, as you know, was Indian. In 2024, she's black. And Candace Owens has done some really good journalism, investigative journalism, and she's claiming that she ain't even, that Kamala isn't even black. Check this out.
So here's the deal. You have Kamala Harris, and she was, throughout her entire political life, a very proud Indian woman. And that makes sense, because in case you didn't know this, Kamala Harris, despite being some percentage of black, her father is not fully black, her mother is fully Indian. She grew up with just her mother because her parents divorced when she was either 4 or 7, when she was very young. You know, she wouldn't have quite memory of her father. That's why she doesn't speak about her black father. So it is an absolute absurdity to suggest that Kamala Harris grew up in an environment where she was being impacted by black culture. I'll show you a couple of pictures of her, by the way, growing up. There she is. This is her as an adult, obviously, with her mother, and perhaps, I'm guessing, her sister, not entirely sure. Here is another photo of Kamala Harris with her mother, and her mother looks very Indian to me. Her mother looks like Princess Jasmine, exactly like Princess Jasmine's hairstyle, right? Here she is. Yep, traditional Indian upbringing that Kamala Harris had. And I want to be clear, Kamala Harris, like I said, loved being an Indian woman because it helped her when she was running for various positions. And when she became a senator, she got to applaud the fact that she was the first Indian American. She was so proud of her heritage as an Indian her entire life. I'm just going to jog your memory by showing you just a couple of clips of how the news covered her, because this is how she was running. Take a listen.
California's Kamala Harris is the first Indian American U.S. senator.
And California's Attorney General Kamala Harris has scripted history as she won the U.S. Senate seat from the state, becoming the first Indian American to achieve this feat.
And certainly you could become the first Indian senator in U.S. history, which would be quite an accomplishment.
Knock wood.
I think she was speaking a different language. She was very excited. Anyways, that was Kamala Harris before she found out that she had to go black.
Ladies and gentlemen, I suspect that what is going to happen next is that she is going to join forces with Elizabeth Warren, and she's going to come out in a headdress, and she's going to tell you that she's really Indian, as in Native American. I don't know. It's just, you remember that girl on The Exorcist? If you're old enough to remember that movie, her head just spins around. My head is metaphorically just spinning around, because I can't believe what I hear, that nearly half of the American people validate P.T. Barnum virtually every day because they accept it. They believe it. They take it hook, line, and sinker. They let her off scot-free. Why? Because they want simple answers, and they're not willing to invest the time to really peel back the onion and get to the facts and listen to the truth every Saturday from 12 to 1:30 or 2 like you do. Which brings me to a couple of important points I want to make with you today. We're on YouTube Live, we're on Getter Live, we're on Rumble. Actually, it's allthose.com, hit the live button, and you'll find us. But look, it's confusing because we're also on the CD media platforms, on 13 global platforms on the World Wide Web, and they simulcast John Gordon Truth every Saturday. So you can go and watch it there. Well, all we're doing is our subscribers are subscribing there. And you can watch it on John Fredericks on Getter. And all we're doing is making John Fredericks look like a hero because his subscribers are going up every weekend. I know I'm confusing you. Hell, I'm confused. But it's really simple. If you want to watch us live and be entertained a little bit more, go to getter.com and go for John Gordon Truth and find our Getter feed. And go to Rumble and find our Rumble feed, and go to YouTube and find our live feed, and subscribe and like if you do, because I'm trying to get the word out. And I can only do it if we get more subscribers. Now, our subscription levels are really rising. But do you know how many people subscribe that listen to us? Less than 10%. And I don't charge you anything. And I'm not making you watch advertisements. So do Big John a little favor and go find our channel and subscribe to it. And if you do, email me. Email me at johngordontruth@gmail.com. And I will send you a thank you note back. And I will also enter you in a lottery to get a MAGA hat autographed by Rudy Giuliani. I spent a couple of hours a week ago with Rudy down in Miami. He spoke at a Rudy Giuliani Legal Fund dinner. I was able to spend some time with the mayor. He autographed that hat I want to send to you. But you got to subscribe to John Gordon Truth on either Rumble, Getter, or YouTube. And you got to email me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. I'm going to email you back, and I'm going to put your name into a lottery, and I'm going to raffle it off. You're going to get that hat. But listen, you want to stay tuned for later in the broadcast today, because I'm going to take you inside an anatomy of a facelift. And it's going to be really good. It's going to be really exciting. It's going to be really entertaining. And I'm probably going to get divorced next week after, oh gosh, I may have done this without the proper permission. Anyway, stay tuned. I guarantee you're going to like it. And I hope that someone I know really, really well is going to like it. We have been the greatest teachers for the whole world, powers. For the last 50 years, we've gone around and we have destabilized governments because we decided we didn't like them. We've done it all around the world. We did it in Venezuela. We tried to do it in Cuba. That one backfired. We did it in Iraq. We got rid of Saddam Hussein on a false narrative of weapons of mass destruction. And in the process, we have trained the entire world superpowers on how to destabilize a nation. Now, you haven't heard this anywhere else, but I'm going to tell you right here today on The Truth. I've been giving this a tremendous amount of thought, and I think I figured it out. I think I have figured it out. I think our enemies, Iran, Russia, China, Venezuela, I think they're conspiring either explicitly or through a unwritten or unspoken conspiracy to destabilize our country. And they're doing it through foreign agents that they've installed in the United States. All right, let's get right to our interview now. Welcome to The Truth. Today we are going to unmask the deep state, and here to help us do it, I'm happy to welcome Vem Miller to The Truth. Vem, welcome.
How you doing? Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, Vem. He is a music producer, a film producer, and he is a political activist. And Vem has become hyper aware of activities from the deep state, which is a subject that listeners to The Truth have heard us talk about a lot of late. So Vem, let's get right to it. How did you become aware of the deep state and when?
Funny enough, the first time I ever heard about the deep state, which I think indicates where our politics has gone, is through hardcore Democrats. In 1992, I think it was, a friend of mine that was later on became a famous singer of a rock band in Los Angeles showed me these books on how there was a deep state, how the intelligence operations or intelligence community was part of that deep state and what they were doing, and started exposing things like chemtrails. I mean, we're talking 30-something years ago, And the irony of all of this to me is like where our politics has gone, because this used to be a big topic amongst Democrats. The idea that there is a deep state, they're poisoning us, and they want us to go to war. And when I came of age, that was my first entry into politics, was realizing that George W. Bush was a really not a good person, was lying to us, getting us into all these unnecessary wars and infringing upon our rights via Patriot Act. And that was really my entry, as I thought the Republicans were the bad guys. And then lo and behold, I discovered, no, it's a uniparty. They're part of a deep state. They're all part of the same thing. Because I thought, hey, Barack Obama came, is talking all this peace and love stuff. He's going to go after the military-industrial complex. Well, lo and behold, he was part of the military-industrial complex, part of the same program. And then we have Trump, who was genuinely wanted peace, And so I started to see the distinction there between Republican Democrats, and realizing that it's just wings of the same corrupt bird. And really the outlier here is Donald Trump, and hence why we seem to be leaning more towards him to be president.
So how has that helped or hindered or hurt your standing in Hollywood if you are now a Trump sympathizer, much less a loyalist, it sounds like?
In Hollywood, in 2015, before I had my enlightening experiences in terms of what was really going on, for a moment of time, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, believe it or not, and I didn't understand the implications of that. So apologies, viewers. I would never ever consider throwing a dime at Bernie Sanders. But when it was a Hillary versus Bernie contrast, I was definitely much more into Hillary into Bernie at the time. And for doing that, I was attacked, I was shunned, and we're talking about not Trump, we're talking about Bernie, right? So I started to realize, wow, there's a fanatical element here in Hollywood, because, I'm just saying the other guy, because I never got good, and I didn't know the things that I know now about Hillary. So I just felt like, oh, Hillary's kind of creepy. I don't like her. I like this Bernie guy. Seems like a much better person, at the time. And for that, I was looked at as like I must be crazy. And so then it came to a point where you just lose like fear at one point. I think there's people react in two different ways. There's a kind of person that'll go into their hole and literally live a fictitious existence in order to make others happy, in order to make the community and the peers happy. I took a very different approach, because once I started realizing, and this is again 2015, 2016, once I started realizing what they were doing with Donald Trump, with the fiction that they were putting out there, with the reality TV show editing tricks that they were doing to create false realities, then I started to become much more of a Donald Trump fan, because it became very apparent that they were trying so hard to put fiction out there. I was like, wait a minute, you guys are like lying. And so I started realizing that there's literally an industry of propaganda there, And around 2016 is when I kind of had it enough. And I just came out of, so to speak, I came out of the closet and lost, 1,000-something Facebook friends, and had people calling me a white supremacist and all kinds of names. But you just stop caring after a while, you know what I mean? And I think that, when we're talking about castrating children, when we're talking about giving jabs that kill people, I mean, it just, at a point, it becomes like, which side are you on? We're going to be part of that evil. And that's just something that I was not cool with. And I decided, you know what, I'd rather sacrifice my 6-figure Hollywood career and retain my soul, as opposed to be part of this evil propaganda machine.
Well, you've just become my best friend. I mean, I think if people... Well, you're enlightened, and I think the largest problem that we have in our country today are so many people are not really informed, and they get their news from the mainstream media because they always have. They vote Democratic because they always have. And of course, I'm speaking about blacks and Jews in particular, because I don't know how Joe Biden says if you weren't voting for him, you weren't black. I don't know how a black person in America today
Yeah,
could not vote for Donald Trump. He did more to help the black community in terms of bringing them up, employment, giving them. Kamala Harris talks about opportunity. Donald Trump created jobs and gave them opportunity. But he also did more for reforming criminal justice in 4 years than Barack Obama did in 8. In fact, Barack Obama didn't really seem that interested in criminal justice reform. Donald Trump said he was going to do it, and he did. And I think he'll do a lot more starting in January the 20th, 2025, if we get across the line. But I think you've nailed it. What I don't understand, I mean, Bernie Sanders, really, he's to the left of Hillary, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, totally. And I didn't, these are things I didn't understand. I mean, I'm semi-embarrassed, but I say these stories because, people accuse people like myself of being, a certain kind of shade of, oh, you're obviously raised racist and blah, blah, blah. And it's just the logic of it is so illogical, right? That no, in 1992, I learned about deep state through Democrats. I was a hardcore Democrat, a JFK Democrat, and that was the distinction for me, right? When I realized that the JFK Democrats were like a thing of the past, that these Democrats are resembling nothing like JFK Democrats. My attraction to Bernie Sanders was believing he was a JFK Democrat. But when I realized the man's a communist, obviously, definitely not attracted to communism since my entire family escaped that and came here. And, so I was fooled because that's what the mainstream media does. But having been behind the scenes,
it's brainwashing. I mean, that's what they've done to us, that they've brainwashed us. And they've told us that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and that if you don't believe that, you're a conspiratorialist, so don't ask any questions. And the American public have fallen for it because it's convenient. But I think that when you zoom out, that people vote for 4 main reasons. And it may be an oversimplification, but I put it in the category of ideology, policy, character, and personality. And all too often, personality takes on the bigger criteria in people's decision making because it's easy. I like the guy. No, I don't like the guy. That determines who you're going to vote for, really? Well, that's the problem that Donald Trump has in his public persona. I've had the pleasure of getting to know him, and his private persona is somebody I really enjoy. He is smart, he is funny, and he is principled. And
he's the man that's an alpha that they hate. This is about attacks on the alpha male. The image that Donald Trump presents, okay, if you look at the world history, right, you have individuals like Ataturk in Turkey, okay, and Ataturk in Turkey, and I'm not suggesting that we should have an Ataturk in this country because Ataturk was a dictator, okay, but the presence of Ataturk, his courage at that time in history, and again, I'm opposed to Ataturk and everything he stood for. But because of his presence, his alpha male characteristics, his leadership, he's influenced Turkey for over 100 years. Every building you walk into, there's a picture of Ataturk. And again, I don't condone that because that's dictator type stuff. But that is an influence that somebody that had a powerful persona had in a country that's lasted over a century. Okay. This is what they're so scared of Donald Trump, because you have a contrast there. You have this weak, frail male, which, by the way, the third wave feminists love because he's a complete tool. And I'm referring to Biden, like literally a puppet, hand puppet for them, for the third wave feminists. And then you have Donald Trump that couldn't give a rat's ass about that sort of thing. That is the biggest threat to them, because if this man wins, it's about his aura, his personality. Now you have you have generations of men wanting to be Trump-like. What does that do to the deep state? You know, so that's what they're scared of, because they want the image of America's leader to be feeble, to be a pushover. And that's what they love. That's what they love so much about Biden and the other hand puppet, Kamala, another hand puppet, Biden. And frankly, I think George W. Bush was another hand puppet. So, yeah. And Bill Clinton as well. And George H.W. Bush. I think the last not hand puppet president we had was Ronald Reagan prior to Trump.
Well, and they tried to take him out, according to some people. I don't know whether John Hinckley was acting on his own volition or whether he had been groomed for what he did. And I really don't have information about that. I just don't.
We did a Roger Stone interview that's fantastic about the JFK assassination. He's writing a new book that he gave us a sneak peek to about his second gunman during that time, because the gunshots actually came from a different direction and there was witnesses. So there's a lot of interesting things about the Reagan assassination of 1981 as well that's about to come out.
And we can see that where? Is that on the America Happens Network, or is that part of your Blood Money podcast?
Well, the JFK assassination documentary, which is at the top of our website, I highly recommend that people go check out our featured section. The short JFK documentary with Roger Stone actually touches upon this topic, but he exposed to us during that documentary that he's working on a book. He gave us some of the details. It's not out yet, but one of the primary details is that even in that incident, the trajectory of the gunshots didn't make sense because they came from a different direction, and they had actually seen, witnesses had actually seen, I believe it was a patio in a hotel, they had seen somebody with a gun up there that was never investigated.
And you're speaking about the attempt on Reagan's life?
Yeah, 1981. The Hinckley, the point being that Roger Stone saying that Hinckley was not, he was the patsy of that. Like, anybody that knows about the RFK assassination, you had Sirhan, who wasn't the guy that fired the kill shots. There was 11 shots. And that's what they do a lot of the time, where that's the diversions created. And the point being that Hinckley was the diversion, and the real gunman during that diversion is the one that killed him, which is exactly what happened with the RFK assassination. I don't
know as much about RFK's assassination as I would like to, but I've obviously read everything that you just said. On JFK's assassination, I have spent a lifetime studying it. There is very little you can ask or talk about on JFK's assassination that I don't know about. And I'm not being proudful or boastful. It's just that I developed an obsession about JFK's assassination because I was 10 years old. I was home from school with the flu, and I watched it all unfold in real time with my mom and dad sitting around our black and white television for 4 days. And so it is seared into my brain. And I was willing as a kid to accept the Warren Commission report. I believed in America. I believed in our government. I had faith in our government. Little did I know until I got to college and heard a book review on A Rush to Judgment by Mark Lane that there were more questions than answers, and the Warren report was a fiction. And here's the thing that really boggles the mind. There is no living person who has bothered to spend an hour, maybe 2 hours, who thinks that Lee Harvey Oswald even pulled the trigger, let alone acted alone. We know that the deep state, i.e. Allen Dulles, killed Kennedy. Johnson and Hoover covered it up. Did they help orchestrate it? I don't know. But you know that Dulles hated Kennedy. Kennedy said he was going to chop the CIA into a million pieces and spread the parts from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And so it was really a function of, do we get him before he gets us? And we know how it played out. I think we lost our innocence on November 22nd, 1963. I think we're still paying for it. But the biggest problem, they got away with it. And there's no accountability. And now they have been emboldened, and the intelligence community has unlimited funding with no oversight and zero accountability. I suspect, without proof, that the CIA, the deep state, I think the members of Congress fall in 3 categories: untouched and untouchable. And I think it's count them on maybe one hand, maybe 2.
Yeah.
Bought off or blackmailed. They got the goods on them. Well, what do you think?
I agree with everything you just said. I mean, I worked in the, I had the fortune of actually working in a lot of these different industries. I actually worked with Diddy personally because I was a music video director. I was a hot music video director for about 8 years. So I saw that part of the world. I've been very much I would call myself an outlier insider, if that makes sense, because I was always an insider in Hollywood, but I was also the outlier because I didn't go along with groups and thoughts. I've just never been the type that's going to be like, oh, let me join your little secret society here or whatever, and let's do a bunch of evil, bad things. I was never a part of that, you know? I relied on the talent alone, but I saw what was happening. And so there's not many people that could tell me that this stuff's fiction when I've actually been to Diddy white parties and stuff. And by the way, Diddy, the white parties versus those freak offs, very different thing. The white parties were kind of G-rated. At least they were on the main floor. I heard there was rooms where there was a lot of shady things going on, but the main floor, you know, was just a gathering of people, right? But I saw how it works. I heard a lot of murmurs. I know that P. Diddy was untouchable. He ripped me off of a lot of money because I was directing a music video for him and I never got paid for it. And I also heard stories about how songs were stolen, albums were stolen, disgruntled artists he worked with that never got paid. But also hearing that, hey, he's untouchable, and understanding that he has protection somewhere, right? We thought that was mafia protection, but it seems as though it's really the feds that are protecting him because he has dirt on a lot of people. So I 100% believe that's part of how they operate, how they blackmail people. And I truly believe that most members of Congress, in fact, the media as well, everybody's got dirt on them. And by the way, one little story I want to tell you. This is actually an interesting story because every time I would sign, so I was a pretty prolific creator of content because I could actually start content from zero and get to a point where I've sold a TV show. Usually that takes more like teams of people. So I started to get a lot of buzz about, you know, the work that I was doing and that sort of thing. What I noticed is that there's a distinction in Hollywood between if you're somebody that is not necessarily needing the help of others, you're usually not going through some of these blackmails, some of these illicit moments where, you know, what I'm trying to get at is actors, producers that are not producing their own content. They're more, due to their need of these power players, they're more vulnerable, right? That stuff didn't touch me, but I actually saw it very clearly with other individuals that they were kind of on strings, you know, more or less.
Well, I want to talk about the music industry. I had it planned for the later in the segment. We can move to it now if you'd like. But
Yeah, sure.
let's push it back for a bit. But I do want to talk about the similarities between Epstein and P. Diddy. Their methods seem to be very similar. I don't have any evidence on P. Diddy being an asset of the CIA. We do have evidence that he was a snitch to the FBI and has been for decades, really. But Epstein, you know, the U.S. attorney, let me see if I can remember exactly how it went. And it was U.S. attorney, I don't think it was U.S. attorney, I think it was the state attorney for Palm Beach County, where Epstein was prosecuted for child trafficking, basically, and sexual assault on a minor. The charges were basically swept under the rug. He got very lenient treatment. And when that individual who prosecuted him had a Senate confirmation hearing in Washington for a job, I'm not sure whose administration it was in. It may have been Bush. But basically, I think maybe Obama. Somebody asked him, well, what are you going to do when they ask you about your leniency towards Epstein? He said, well, I was informed by the CIA that we weren't supposed to touch him, that he was an asset. So that's evidence that we have that Epstein was an asset for the CIA, and I don't pretend to know how or what. But he certainly got leniency in committing heinous acts against people that were minors. That usually gets you pretty severe treatment. And so he had video cameras allegedly in bedrooms, and we know that he had close relationships with Bill Clinton and Bill Gates, and God only knows who else. They have been unable to have any linkage between him and Trump as hard as they've tried, other than Epstein was a member of Mar-a-Lago and Trump kicked him out because he felt he was a sketchy individual. But P. Diddy had cameras in all of his bedrooms. He's gotten away with his deeds for a long time. It sounds like the house of cards are coming crashing down around him. Yeah. So did he make somebody mad? Did he make the wrong people mad, and now they coming down on him?
You know, there's one thing I wanted to mention before I answer that question. Every time I signed to a deal with a production company, and I realized this when I was a TV show director and producer, showrunner, all of a sudden I get invited to a party. There'd be offers of bringing prostitutes. There'd be offers of bringing drugs, right? And I noticed that this was kind of like, oh, welcome to this production. We're about to do a TV show together. We're about to do blah, blah, blah together. Let's have a big old party. And I would never attend these parties because I don't know why. Very early on, I knew there was a game going on. I think as a music video director, I saw a lot of my peers, and this was at a time where you were being told by the record label, you got to hire a woman according to their literal butts, like badunkadunks they used to call them, like the bigger, juicier butt, the better. And so there was a lot of these auditions of literally music video directors auditioning for butts, right? And I said to myself, okay, that's a really good way to get, charged with sexual harassment. Like you're literally, and I wouldn't do it. I would bring in an assistant to do it. Now, lo and behold, a lot of those individuals did eventually get sexual harassment charges. They went after him. I was probably one of the only untouched ones because I never flirted with this world. But what I'm trying to say is, even back then, and I'm talking 20-something years ago, there seemed to have been this idea that, oh, now we're working together and you're going to make a bunch of money. Let's get some dirt on you. Seems to be the way that people operate, in that business a lot of the time.
So are they industry insiders that are trying to leverage artists, or do you think that it is the government and the deep state, or is it the mob that are trying to leverage people? I mean, where is it coming from?
I think this is handlers. I think handlers are actually people that are kind of lower level intelligence that are there to deliver information. There's certain kinds of people that ask a lot of questions that are information collectors. These aren't the James Bond types. Let me put it that way. A lot of the time they make it very obvious that due to their amount of curiosity, there is red flags. Let me put it that way. Red flags because you see these information collectors. People should be very scared of information collectors, because it is something that I've seen across decades of these information collectors. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, the person they're collecting information on is charged with sexual harassment or something. And then they lose their credibility. So that's something that I've definitely seen. I don't have concrete evidence that these people are put there by the CIA, but I do see what handlers do, how some of them collect a lot of information, and that is always a red flag,
So you've worked with some really big artists: DMX, John Mayer, Master P, Chris Brown, Trey Songz, Alien Ant. Some of these people I don't know. Alien Ant Farm, DJ Premier, Jerry Seinfeld. I know that name. The Executioners, and many more. So do you care to tell us who the good guys and who the bad guys are?
I wish I knew. I could tell you DMX, as troubled as that man was, and he was a tsunami, if there ever has been a tsunami in the form of a human being. Actually, I think DMX was one of the most pure, incredible people I've ever met. And I say that even though I worked with him for about a month, and it was actually a nightmare working with him because you're dealing with he's no longer around, but definitely bipolar characteristics, definitely heavy drug addiction, definitely unpredictability. That is kind of makes it scarier to be around him. But what I learned from him is that he was a victim of his upbringing. Basically, his mother was a prostitute. This kid, when he was 8 years old, used to go to bed with literally his mom 10 feet away, bringing, customers in, who was also a crack addict. So it's not like he was given the best, kind of future to begin with. And I think he actually did the best that he could under the circumstances. But I truly believe that the heart and soul of DMX is extremely pure. And he's the only one that really comes to mind where I could tell you, I know DMX was not Luciferian. I know DMX prays to God. I know DMX was a very holy person in his soul. And I truly believe that man is next to God right now because he was a victim of his circumstance more than anything else, So that's 100%.
the one. That's great insight. So what about John Mayer? Where would you put him? I asked that because my wife and we are huge John Mayer fans. We went to Europe and watched him unveil his Battle Studies album for 4 nights, and Manchester, London, Wolverhampton, and Aberdeen. And they were in small venues. It was a real treat. We've seen him 76 times, I think.
Oh, wow, wow.
We
wow.
might have an illness, I'm not sure. But there are nice places to go. We've seen him in Madison Square Garden and Radio City, Las Vegas, LA, you name it. Anyhow, I digress.
I would refer to, Steve Jobs in his biography right before he died actually talked about John Mayer, and I would refer to what he said about John Mayer, which firstly, John Mayer, I believe, is one of the most talented individuals. You rarely see talent like that. I mean, this guy's the kind of guy that picks up a guitar, and he is beyond talented. God has given him so much. He's handsome. He's like charismatic. And I do like him, right? But at that time we were working together was right around the time that he also knew Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs talks about how John Mayer is his own worst enemy. And I also agree with that because while he is incredibly talented, I've seen him do things that I don't think have been really mature, kind of the celebrity gone wild, so to speak, and a little bit of narcissism perhaps. But you get that with artists.
Well, there's no question. I mean, I know probably as much about John Mayer as I do about JFK's assassination. I think he went through a very rough growing up period, but he blew up as a star at 20. Yeah. And I've gone to so many concerts and charity benefits where he was performing, and I've seen these beautiful, some of the most beautiful women I've ever laid eyes on that would do anything to catch his eye.
This is what annoyed me about John Mayer. Could I tell you the specific thing that annoyed the crap out of me is that you're John Mayer. You're already the most handsome dude. You have literally, if you opened up your door and you said beautiful women line up, he'll never get out of that bedroom. He could,
He'd be around the block.
Until he's old and stuff. But we're doing interviews and he's it was for the Bucket List movie, by the way, because the video I was directing was for the Bucket List movie, Rob Reiner directed with, I believe, Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman, right? Uh-huh. And so the reporters ask him, they're like, do you have a bucket list? And then he's like, well, I got something that rhymes with bucket list. And he was definitely referring to all the women in his life. And I don't know. I just think things like that are cheesy to say. You're John Mayer. Obviously, it's like the Beatles. Yes, you could have sex with 90% of the women on the streets and stuff. It just, I found that to be very distasteful and arrogant of him. But, whatever.
So I've met the dude probably 7 times. Yeah. And we flew all the way over to England, as I mentioned, to see him in Manchester. The next night we were in Aberdeen. It was a small venue, maybe 1,500, 2,000 people. We were walking out. It was in January. It's freezing cold. I don't know if you've ever been to Aberdeen, Scotland in the winter, but oh my gosh, it's like
I've been to Wales. It's
you can see the North Pole from there, I think. So all the buses were lined up. I said, Helen, this is our chance. Let's hang out and see if we can say hello to John. So sure enough, 2 minutes later, he walks out and I'm yelling, John, come down here, sign autographs. Mm-hmm. He walks over. So there are 20 people there. He starts at the beginning of the line and he walks down. And I said, hey, John, we came all the way from Atlanta to see you. Oh, that's great. I was driving up 85 just yesterday. Oh, that's funny. That's a lyric in his song. Yeah. And he went to the next person. So every encounter I had with him was just like that, except the 8th time I met him, and I wanted to get into this a little bit with you. For 10 years, I've worked at the Grammys for the executive producer. And it was my Walter Mitty experience. I basically was able to shadow him. He wanted coffee, lunch, go to the bank, whatever it was. I was the oldest PA in America for 10 days a year for 10 years. And it was a phenomenal experience because I love music so much. But I saw my man crush. There comes John Mayer. He's presenting. And I went up to him and I said, hey, John, I had a beer with just about everybody in your crew. And I thought that someday you and I would have a beer, but you kind of fixed that, didn't you? And I was alluding to the fact that he had become sober. He said, yeah, that's right. And he said, and that's probably why I'm able to stand here at 11 o'clock in the morning and have a lucid conversation with you. Yeah. He immediately won me over and earned my respect because I think all that stuff you're talking about is in his past. I think I think Hollywood, I think they punished him severely because, he went on that interview with Playboy magazine, and I am convinced that he was stoned when he did it. And he made some off-color comments about some of the ladies that he had consorted with, and that did not fly well. He said that somebody was sexual napalm. Who did he make that comment about?
Oh, I know. Was it Jennifer? What's her name? Jennifer something?
Yes.
Or Jessica something, maybe.
But anyway, he meant no harm, but unless you're Jennifer somebody, he didn't like that. And so Hollywood really turned against him and punished him. And then he came out with his apology album and said, I'm a good man that had to learn the lessons the hard way. And so he basically went to Montana and isolated for 3 years, got off the scene, and came back to try and reinvent himself, which I think he's done. I think he's really found his footing. All right, we probably ought to get back to politics. I want to ask you, P. Diddy. I've had no interest in P. Diddy. It's not my genre, not my kind of guy. But all this stuff is now coming out, and I've read that P. Diddy and Usher abused Justin Bieber when he was under the age of 18. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard rumors or confirmed or denied?
I don't have any concrete evidence, but I totally believe that it happened. I totally believe that P. Diddy first abused Usher, and that was part of the whole thing. I mean, there's a lot of videos out there. There's actually a video of what looks like Justin Bieber giving a to a football player out there. And that's very suspicious because he's literally on his knees in front of the dude's which is not normal behavior for most heterosexual men.
I suspect what you're saying is true. And I think a crime against a child is the worst crime a human being can commit, in my opinion. A defenseless child. And I've met Justin Bieber, and I'm not a huge fan. No, I am a fan. I am a fan of Justin Bieber, but I'm not a little girl fan like most of his fans are. But I do like his music, especially when he does collaborations with other people. He seemed like an innocent kid to me that, like John Mayer, found fame, fortune, and temptation at an all too young age. Usher got in because he mentored Justin Bieber, and Scooter Braun, I think, really facilitated that. I don't know whether Scooter knew what hell he was unleashing on Justin Bieber's life or not, or whether he was every much as surprised by it. But I think that is the tragedy of Justin Bieber. I think Justin's gone through a very difficult time getting his head back together, and he's got a beautiful, lovely wife now. I wish him the best. All right, well, let's get back to something I know a little bit about, and that's politics. I've seen things that are happening that I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
January 6th. What a crock. If that wasn't a movie production, I would spend my last dollar on earth saying that was orchestrated by Nancy Pelosi and these demonic Democrats. 2 attempted assassinations on Donald Trump. I have studied them intently. In fact, Gage over here in the glass cage, you gonna put yourself on camera, Gage? Let's show him the glass cage. There's Gage. He and I have been out to Trump International 2 weeks in a row. I have talked to every single person on the sidewalks and the streets, at the post office. We've talked to some eyewitnesses who were there. And, I have no security training at all. I know nothing about protecting an asset, but I am reasonably smart, and I've got 2 eyes, and I've got some common sense, and I have gone to that venue. There are 2 holes, hole 5 and 6. 5 is along Congress, 6 is along Summit. And then, stick with me here just a second.
Sure.
I live 6 blocks from Southern Boulevard, where Trump comes and goes from his Mar-a-Lago estate to the Palm Beach airport. It's a 10-minute ride. I have never seen the spectacle of law enforcement that I've seen since Butler. They've got more law enforcement, and they've got Army guys with helmets on and night vision. I mean, it is unbelievable. Last Sunday, they had 50 motorcycle cops from Palm Beach County, Broward County, the State Patrol. You have never seen the display of law enforcement ever, except for when Netanyahu was here. Wow. Leading me to wonder, Where in the hell was the protection 2 weeks ago at Trump International? You could have taken one of those 50 motorcycle cops and positioned him on the north corner. You could have put one on the south corner, both with binoculars looking at each other, and one on the west corner. You would have covered virtually the entire exposed perimeter of Trump International Golf Course. But they didn't. What it says to me is that they opened the door and said, hey, come on in. But then they put on this spectacle like, oh, look at what we're doing to protect Trump. Look at how effective we are. And it's just a menage.
I mean, you're a JFK assassination buff. I mean, you know, the stand down orders and all that stuff. That seems to be part of this, right? Is the insiders that allow it to happen. And I think that's what you're looking at here. I hope it is properly investigated. I hope those individuals, I mean, you're looking at like treason charges. Like this ain't even like if you had a law, you know, if our legal institutions were not controlled by the bar, that is basically allowing the potential assassination of a president is treason.
I vote Republican. I've been a Republican most of my life. I care about the truth. I care about honesty. I care about the Bible and God. The things that these people have done. I had dinner with Ted Cruz a year ago. Yeah. And there were 12 of us sitting around this table, and he was a delightful individual, by the way. I asked him about JFK's assassination because some people, including Donald Trump, believe that his dad had a role in it. Got kind of uncomfortable there for a minute. But really? Then towards the end of the dinner, we started talking about Biden, and everybody was going off on him. And I said, I do not think that we should impeach Joe Biden. Dead silence. Where is this going? I said, we should try him for treason. And that's what I honestly believe. He's taken millions of dollars, $3 million that Jamie Comer has proven from the Chinese, a company that with direct ties to the CCP. And then Biden, our Defense Department, watched a spy balloon leave China, float across the Pacific, enter into Canada, and dip down into the United States, where it lingered for 5 days. Yeah. And then we shoot it down over the Atlantic after the mission is completed. Yeah. My God, where is the outrage? If that is not evidence of his not his mental state, of his corrupt state, I don't know what is it. To me, it says it all.
You know, the inherent issue here is that, yes, these are legitimate legal ideas that you're talking about. But when you have your legal societies really controlled by the bar, which could be classified as an unlawful monopoly because it's not like they control the business of law. And it is a business. It is an industry. So I see an inherent issue there with how the whole thing's been set up. And I think it's been set up intentionally that way, you know, because as you know, you probably know that like every single one of us is committing 3 felonies a day, according to evidence out there in terms of how they stack these laws, right? So they could selectively persecute anybody. That to me is one of the most authoritarian devices that they have against us, because they could shut any one of us up at any given time. Now, why is it set up that way? Why isn't there a competing bar? When we look at monopolies and we say, okay, Microsoft's a monopoly, that is a monopoly that's controlling the computer world, the software world, right? The same thing could be said about the bar. So why is that not addressed? Well, the mechanisms by which you would address that is our checks and balances. But you have a situation here where 2 or 3 branches of government are actually held hostage by the bar because the judiciary is all bar agents. And then you have your Congress, which is 75% bar agents that are essentially creating laws in order to facilitate the needs of the bar and not the needs of we the people. So there's the way that whole thing's been structured. And then you get back into topics like the original 13th Amendment, which prohibited lawyers from being in Congress, because logic would dictate that if you have lawyers filling up the judiciary, why destroy your checks and balances by having them occupy Congress? So the Congress was always intended by the founders, I believe, for, priests, business people to dip in there after they have success in regular life, come in there for a term or two and then return back to their regular life. But instead what's happened is it's become this, essentially a bunch of parasites that go in there to make themselves rich. They could give a rat's ass about we the people, and they do whatever the hell they want. And they go in there, with 200,000 in the bank, they come out with 100 million in the bank. So
well, and their wives become uber wealthy.
It's like that would be actually against the insider trading regulations, but they don't get held accountable. It's all corruption. Yeah.
Well, you make an interesting point about the bar that I haven't really considered. I've been a member of the Georgia bar since 1979. I'm not sure that it was intentional when the bar was established. I actually became a lawyer at the tail end of when being a lawyer was a gentlemanly profession.
Yeah. Yeah.
People took great pride in treating each other with respect. There was an unwritten code that you acted and behaved as a gentleman, and that you had ethics, and that it was basically self-policing.
Yeah.
But just like the United States government, I think the United States government and the United States Constitution are perfect institutions, and the Constitution is a wonderful, I think near perfect governing document.
Yeah.
But it's morphed. The whole society has morphed. And this is one of the things that I ponder a lot,
Feminism.
I'm sorry.
Feminine. It's feminism. It's all feminism. And people have been, essentially groomed to be scared to say that. This is all feminism. This is third wave feminism, because that whole honors-based society, and I know all about that because I've studied law, the history of law, where it was honor-based because men were groomed to be gentlemen. This was an era of opening doors for women, right? But then when women started these attacks against masculinity and via third wave feminism, all of a sudden, there's a lot of things that happened there where the fathers were removed from the family. 90% of our prison population is single moms. You look at what's happened there. This whole thing has been completely destructive. Honor has left our legal fields because, unfortunately, and this might sound nasty, but I don't think a lot of these third wave feminists have that sense of honor, because they see honor comes from facts, right? You follow the facts. When you change that with emotion, that's when the danger happens. And a lot of what's been introduced into our legal fields has been emotion-based, right? It's not, and you can't, it's like talking to leftists. You can't convince somebody that's coming from emotion that they are heading down the wrong path. And I think that's what this third wave feminism has introduced into our legal world, into our politics, where now people react based upon emotion as opposed to actual facts and based on honor.
Well, you make an interesting point. I was going in a slightly different direction. I guess the perspective that I've thought a lot about is that when I was younger, there was a tremendous amount of poverty and illiteracy in our country, and the differences between being really, really rich and really, really poor were vast. Even though I'm kind of thinking this through as I'm speaking, the ultra rich have really gone to a new level altogether in our country, but there is still a large middle class, and I think that there has been a lot of improvement in terms of education, literacy, and getting rid of poverty in our country. But here's my question. If you accept that as the hypothesis, it seems like the more prosperous we become and the better educated we become, the more demonic our society becomes. And it seems like we would move towards being respectful of one another as opposed to the direction that I see the country taking. The Democratic Party, I would have argued 20 or 30 years ago, was a party of free speech, women's rights, freedom of religion. Those were democratic principles. Now, the very people who are supposed to be for women's rights are allowing transgender people to come and compete in women's sports.
Wow.
standing up for women's rights. And the people that have championed themselves, ushering in civil rights and protecting black people's rights and elevating them in society, have brought in 15 million illegal aliens from Mexico, Central and South America, and they're stealing the jobs from the black community. That's not taking up for blacks. So it's very much a dichotomy to me of what we see and how things have changed so dramatically. Hence, the Republicans are the ones that are now becoming the working class party.
There's a saying that came to mind as you were talking. You know, the idle mind is the devil's playground. And I think the more luxury we have in our world, the more that we have, the more we become that idle mind, you know, and we allow evil things in. And, you know, again, let's talk about scripture, you know, Adam and Eve, like the evil was led into the Garden of Eden because of temptation that the female went through. These are lessons that I think we need to definitely pay attention to, because a lot of what we're talking about here is the fact that we have become too spoiled. I think this is a matter of being spoiled, not knowing the privilege that you have. And I think the whole thing's been set up is wrong, right? Let's look at Israel as an example, okay? In Israel, which is a very successful country, there's a great book called Startup Nation in terms of, you know, the tech in Israel. But what happens in Israel? When somebody turns 16 or 17, they have to go do time in a kibbutz, right? Communal, okay? What happens in those kibbutz? You learn discipline. You learn really the importance of what's happening in the world, why you need to protect that land, right? There's no such mechanism in the United States. So a spoiled child grows up completely detached from what the real world is, okay? Like with their cars, you know, and I see it all the time where these kids don't have any semblance of reality of what the world is. Their values are all screwed up, right? And that I think is because we're a spoiled country. We've had it too good for a long time. And right now, I mean, it seems as though there's times coming where those good times are about to go away, and we're about to see what the struggles of the rest of the world look like. And I think that's going to be a big time course correction. And I think we need that. We need that. And I have ancestors and family in different countries. I know what's going on over there. And I think a lot of the original kind of people that came in, 1700s had that attachment to the tyranny and all that nastiness that was over there. So they appreciated this. And a lot of Americans don't have that right now. They don't have that perspective. And that's actually one of the reasons why I do this sort of work, is because I do have that perspective. I know, I'm of Armenian descent. I know what Armenia looks like. I know what these former Soviet republics look like. So I know how good we have it. And that is the course correction there that needs to happen. People need to know, like, we are truly privileged. This is, people say, oh, this is such a bad country. Well, give me the example of, what this utopia that you're dreaming about is out there.
Vem, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I had this virtual identical conversation with Secretary Ross, Wilbur Ross, who just published a new book and came on The Truth to talk about it. And he said that we have developed a generation of hypersensitive males. And if you look at them crossways, they'd fall apart. ACLU, by the way, American Civil Liberties Union, that's what I was trying to bring from back here.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I think that it was done with good intentions. I mean, my wife and I wanted to make life better for our children than we had it. We had it really good. But I think the difference between my parents and our generation's parents were that my parents did not prevent me from failing. They did not catch me if I fell. They allowed me to experience life and learn from the experiences and learn some very hard lessons. And we've tried to, I think, with all good intentions, create this fantasy world for our children. Now they get out in the real world and they find out, well, it's not like I thought it was. This really is hard.
It's this fictitious reality that they're going into, and this idea that we're supposed to be happy all the time, and if you're not happy, take this pill and it'll take your depression away. Pain is the greatest teacher. If you're not learning, then you're not growing. And I think a lot of these men, and I felt this, by the way, when I was growing up. I don't think we had it hard enough, coming up in the 80s, 90s, right? But we definitely had a much more of a perspective of the world than these kids do nowadays, because, a tweet will make some of these kids fall apart. And, you look at like the feminizing of men. We do a lot of that topic on the America Happens Network, where, our food, our water, clearly men that are being chemically castrated and they don't even know it. And that tells you a lot, And the last thing I want to say is the role of men in all of this equation. We've been brainwashed into thinking that, men and women are equal, which is the biggest BS on the world. In the world, that is the biggest BS. Men and women are not equal. I'm sorry. If men are not the protectors of society, women are not equipped to protect society. Women, as we've seen, predominantly vote Democrat out of the most selfish principles, which is abortion. So to them, murdering a child on the majority of women that are voting is paramount to everything else happening in the world, it seems. So to me, whereas men is like, men most of the time vote out of logic, not out of emotion. They vote for, their future, their children, society. This false notion that, men and women, like women could be as great leaders as men and all that stuff. I'm sorry, I know it sounds sexist me saying that. By today's standards, a complete falsity. If you look at why we're out of the caves, for example, 99.99999% of things that got us out of the caves and this evolution happening. And I'm not talking about Darwin's evolution. I'm talking about evolution and technology, thought, all that stuff. The work of men, you unplug that, and we've seen the unplugging of that, and look at the disaster this country's become in a matter of decades, So we got to get back to reality, and men have to start embracing their roles as leaders and stop being these whiny simps. So,
Well, I think you make very good points on many issues. Biologically, men and women are not the same. Now, there are some women who are stronger than a lot of other women. Some of those women are stronger than some men. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about a world population of 7.5 billion people. Mm-hmm. Men are built differently than women. Okay. I mean, I don't know any women that are like Wilt Chamberlain or pick your player or your favorite baseball player. I mean, it just they're constructed differently. Yeah. I don't think that's something that men need to apologize for, and I don't think that we need to ignore the reality. I guess what I would say, and you may or may not agree, I think women should be afforded the same opportunity as men. I don't believe in a glass ceiling. I think that if a woman wants to choose to go into the workforce and that she wants to climb the corporate ladder, she should have every opportunity to do so. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, the girls always were the ones who got the A's. I was a C student, happy to get a C. The girls were smarter than most of the guys, and I'm happy to give that to them, It's not universally true, but I know my wife's smarter than I am. She's in the next room listening. So
yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think women have to have the same opportunities, but we can't live in this fictitious world anymore where we're all equal, and it's just not. Women are not wired like men are wired, And I think that's actually been a huge disaster, this third wave feminism, where you have these males now competing in these female competition, and half the women out there are embracing it. They're saying that, if the person identifies as a female, they're a female. And again, I don't think these kind of loose type morals, loose type ideas would have succeeded if it wasn't for third wave feminism. I think that opened the door, and now we have these ridiculous ideas, including, you could castrate a child because a 7-year-old thinks they're a girl. I mean, the gateway to this nonsense and evil was feminism, and then second wave feminism, and then third wave feminism. And what I think you and I agree on is first wave feminism, which is that women should have the same opportunity, same pay, same that, right?
100%. But 100%. Riley Gaines should not have to have spent her entire life reaching to be an Olympic swimmer, to find her dream shattered because some dude shows up in a bikini claiming to be a woman. I think that is the most absurd, ridiculous thing I've ever seen or heard in my life. It is devoid of common sense. But the thing that boggles my mind, the NCAA is permitting it. And they will say behind closed doors, according to Riley Gaines, that we don't think that, we don't believe that should happen. We don't think that should happen. But in public, they're permitting it.
It's cowardice. It's cowardice, you know. And I'm going to make a statement here that you've probably never ever heard this one. It's probably going to be very inflammatory. But again, something that comes to mind is that, so I'm of Armenian descent, right? We're an ancient people. We've actually been around for thousands of years, like the Jews, okay? Like other cultures. There is very few cultures that have been around for as long as Armenians and Jews. Very few. And I don't think there is, you know, if you look at like history, it's like, I don't think there is actually any other culture. But there are some that have been around thousands of years. I think Armenian Jews, we're looking at 7,000 year history that is verifiable, and even getting more and more as they do archaeological findings, right? The way the Armenians and Jews and other races that have been around for a long time have survived is what today is defined as sexism and racism. What is defined today as sexism and racism is the reason these ancient people are still around, because they made choices to protect their communities. By today's standards, if you ask somebody like a Kamala Harris or you know, some of these leftists, what do they define that as? They'll say that's sexist and racist. But that's how these people have survived that long. Amongst mixing of cultures, amongst a lot of crazy ideas, amongst the fall of the Roman Empire and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and literally emperor, Byzantine Empire, by the way, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, how many people could claim that? But the way they were able to do that is protecting their culture, their morals. Just something to think about, you know? In terms of who influences us, their words, their definitions, and what really holds true when you look at human history.
Vem Miller, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. You've certainly given us a lot to think about. I'm sure it will stimulate a lot of conversation. The phone lines are lighting up. Unfortunately, we committed Vem for an hour and we've used it up, but you can find him on the American Happens Network and tune in to his Blood Money podcast. So the website would just Google American Happens Network or AHN. What's the domain?
AmericaHappens.com, and I highly recommend people to go on there because that's our portal to all of our different broadcasting sites, which includes Rumble, X. Also, we got on Smart TV about 2 months ago. We're on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. And just, you know, check us out, subscribe. We actually have a featured section at the top of that website, which has a documentary called Bundy versus Deep State. I highly recommend people watch it. It's going to blow you away. You've never seen something like this, unfortunately, due to the events that happened in the filing of this lawsuit, which the lawsuit's also available on the site. People could actually read it because this is something that's repeatable across all states in order for us to get our freedoms back from a tyrannical federal government. So I highly recommend people check that out. And also the JFK documentary. We got so much good stuff in our featured section in terms of the work that we do. Over 700 episodes, but in our featured section, we have about 20 of the best things. All that I recommend that people check out.
Well, I think the difference between JFK's assassination and the attempt on Donald Trump's life, it took 65 years for us to really discover the truth on JFK's assassination. Yeah. It took about 6 hours for people like you and myself. I hope I play a small role. Don Bongino and the other YouTubers who are out there scouring every bit of information they can. And I think that what we really need, I think about this stuff every day. How are we going to get the genie back in the bottle? How do we get the train back on the track? I think it is going to require a citizens' revolt, a citizens' peaceful revolution. Yeah. And we can push back against these evil forces, and we just have to keep doing it like you're doing every day, and I'm trying to do my part. Thank you so much, Vem, for coming on The Truth today, and I hope you'll come back soon and often.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you enjoy The Truth. And as you know, we often have a segment called Growing Old Gracefully, BS. And that's what we're going to do today. Actually, don't tell anybody, but my wife, Helen, is going in to have a facelift. Now, she's going to kill me if she knows I'm telling anybody.
I was going to tell you I'm going to go play a little golf. Is that okay? Because, I want to get some golf in before I go through.
Well, I was just sitting here doing a little work for the broadcast.
Liar! Oh. Well, who are you talking to?
Well, actually, I was just sort of going through some things in my mind.
Oh, practicing.
I mean, you're not nervous about it? Do you think this is the right decision to make?
Yes. Don't you think they'll look better like that?
Sweetie, I love you just the way you are.
Now, sweetie, I know, but when I go out with you and we go to those clubs, those little women, those young women come up and pinch my cheeks and say I'm a cute little old lady.
But you do not have to get a facelift for me. I don't do it for me. I love you just the way you are. I don't even look at these other girls that you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about.
I kind of do think we sometimes wear those sexy just a little bit, or maybe even it.
Well, are you feeling okay about this?
I'm feeling great about
You're
it.
not nervous about it?
Not in the least.
So, and you don't want me to tell anybody?
Well, no, I haven't decided yet because I'm working on. I tell people I'm working on construction. They don't have to know I'm working on body construction or face construction. They can think I'm working on house construction. But I haven't lied.
Okay, well.
I'm not my usual liar.
I'll be saying a prayer for you.
Okay, and I can go practice.
And I'll be there with you every step of the way.
All right.
All right,
Go practice my golf.
love you.
Love you too. Now take the dogs out when you go down the lot.
Well, that went well. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you a glimpse into the experience, and you will be able to see how it goes. And you've seen the before, and in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to see the after. So I'm John Gordon, and this is Growing Old Gracefully, BS.